Well, afternoon, Teresa.
Hello, Jason.
Why don't we just start this interview today with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your teaching experiences?
Certainly. I've been teaching in education for about 30 years. Over 20 of those years would be as a school principal in a variety of schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked in very small schools, in rural areas, in inner city schools, in large suburban schools. So I've had a broad range of experience, not only as a classroom teacher but also as a principal. During my time as principal though, and part of my own learning and development, I went to New York City and worked as a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, I began work in schools in the Bronx and in Brooklyn, focusing on literacy, and particularly in middle schools. And it was at a time when I was in New York that the huge school improvement agenda came in. So I was well positioned then, with my background as a school principal, to then work with leadership teams in those schools on driving a school improvement agenda.
Yes.
So it was great professional development for me, and from there I brought some of those learnings back with me to my schools in Brisbane.
So I've shown you the case study there to do with learning diversity. What are some strategies that you believe that Miss Brown can implement in order to cope with this classroom?
Okay, I've read the case study, and it's no underestimating Miss Brown's got a big job here. But, however, when I look at something like this, I would say, let's first of all look at the teacher, the classroom, the student, the community. Not necessarily in a separate way, but let's take those for the purposes of this discussion. Let's just look at them like that.
Okay.
When you look at Miss Brown here and the complexities that she's managing, and you see the reading ages are from year 2 through to year 12, already you can see the two things that teachers talk about most that they lack, and that's resources and time. So let's back it up a little and talk first of all about Miss Brown.
Okay.
I'm assuming that Miss Brown, she has this sort of classroom with this level of complexity, that the school probably has this type of profile.
Yes.
So let's take that as a given. Let's take it also as a given that I'm going to draw some assumptions here, that there are some resources at the school, that we have some classroom support, etc. So I'm going to draw some assumptions before I talk about some strategies. The first thing I'd probably do with Miss Brown is to talk to Miss Brown about some clear professional goals based on her class data. So we would get, because when you read something like this and you see this huge issue, and teachers, this is particularly beginning teachers come in and they see the huge issue, where do I start? What do I do? Miss Brown's also got a NAP plan year, she's in year 9. So therefore she may be feeling some school improvement agenda targets bearing down on her as well. So the first thing to do is speak with the teacher and talk with the teacher and help her unpack the class profile. So you would sit with her and talk with her about developing some clear professional goals around her class. And let's take the area of reading. So we might look at the student data around reading, and we'd look at some clear professional goals based on the school data and her classroom data. Now, to support her, we could talk strategy with her during the meeting and different things to try, and that may be good. What would really support her, and this is going back to Vygotsky's approach, is to employ for her or have her either in a collegial coaching situation, a colleague of her choice perhaps, or a mentoring situation where we have somebody who's maybe a designated coach on staff, if Miss Brown is comfortable with this, to come in and maybe do some demonstration lessons for her. So you see the link here that I'm saying.
Yes.
As if earlier in the questions we talked about this working for students and the teachers doing explicit teaching for the students. This also helps for the teachers as well.
Yes.
So then that way then, the important word you raised earlier, Joseph, was reflection. Then Miss Brown can see how that's done, look at herself then, and she could then try the approach, have that mentor or coach with her, and then be able to then reflect on that and then refine and as she goes. So that would be a broader strategy that I'd put in place for her.
Okay.
And the goals that I would set with her, the clear professional goals, would have to be time-bound, they would have to be measurable, they would have to be she would have to have feedback on those and timely feedback. So that's all very important. A nice, tight, supportive package for the teacher.
Okay.
The teacher then, so we're also linking in Erickson's continued professional growth here, or lifelong growth I should say.
Yes.
So then that's Miss Brown. So that's her in her professional growth. Then we look at the classroom. And we talk to the teacher then about the systems in the classroom, how she's managing this classroom. So we look at the systems and we look at what's her classroom leadership like. For her leadership then will determine the culture in the classroom for the students. She needs to be aware of the cultures of the students that she has in her class. So she needs to know if she has Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students, as it indicates here, Burmese, Sudanese, Afghani, etc. She needs to know a little bit about these cultures so that she is sensitive to the children's backgrounds and what she can and can't introduce in the classroom. So that's another piece for her. And school resources would be able to support her and help her with that. So we would say to her, let's look at the culture in the classroom. We would have that set up. We'd also look at her planning and that she has focused teaching. Once again, bringing in Vygotsky and his idea of we look at that explicit, focused, not only for her, but also then in group work for students. And then the student intervention piece that she would bring in. We talked before about looking at assisted learning in the classroom, so we would look at that. So we'd look at, we've got leadership, we've got focused teaching, we've got the student intervention piece, and the other piece that Miss Brown needs to really consider is the community building engagement. So how is she going to get the families of the students in her class engaged in what's happening in the learning process? So that it becomes a connect and not a disconnect for her students. So we've looked at her professional support, we've looked at the classroom, now let's look at the students in the classroom. So the students, when you look at their identity and how they perceive themselves in the classroom, we spoke before about making sure that they come to a place that's caring, that has a sense of belonging, that they feel part of. That is theirs.
Yes.
That is it's an extension for them that they feel part of and belong to. So you would look at students could work in groups in this classroom based on their data, and you could also have some lessons here too where you would plan mixed ability groups. So then back to Miss Brown, because she's the teacher, and the teacher's the biggest influence for the children at school. Research shows, not the principal, the teacher. So you would be back to Miss Brown, and you'd be talking to Miss Brown about her assessment. So how is she doing her daily assessment? And you would give her the systems to look at this. So she would assess, she would then plan for her students, because she has a diverse group here. She would plan, she would then match what she's planned to her particular groups in her classroom, those lessons, and then she'd teach it. So she would assess, plan, and match, and teach. And then the community piece as well needs to be considered. So she would engage and build trust. And running activities or running particular events for parents to feel welcome to come into the classroom, to be part of what's happening with their children. Because whatever the background, whatever the cultural beliefs, whatever the cultural norms are for any student in this classroom, I can guarantee you one thing, that every single one of their parents will be wanting these students to succeed. They may have different expectations around what the rigour of the curriculum means for their students, but success and a sense of belonging and a sense of inclusiveness is one that every parent will want, and that way then you can then celebrate the successes along the way.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Teresa.
You're very welcome, Joseph. Anytime.